It's Thursday, and the morning rush has started. Already several cars have pulled up outside Mirwais Hospital's emergency unit here in Kandahar. This one brought Hasina and her sister. They were playing outside their home when they were hit by a driver swerving to avoid a coalition convoy. The convoy never stopped. Passers-by brought them here. The girls were suffering from shock.
In the week we've spent at Mirwais Hospital, there's been a constant flood of civilian casualties. And not just here, throughout Afghanistan, this summer is shaping up to be the deadliest for civilians since the conflict began.
While Operation Panther's Claw has been trying to push the Taliban out of their strongholds in southern Afghanistan, the injured civilians have been flooding here. We came to Mirwais in the last week of July, a month into the British offensive, to see what life has been like for the people caught in the crossfire, the people central to NATO's efforts to win hearts and minds. This is the intensive care unit, the ICU where the most critical patients are brought. They're mainly war-wounded.
He's from yesterday from gunshot wound, from one of the districts of Kandahar.
Is it always this full?
Yeah, always the bed is full. This is all from last night, some emergency cases which was operated for the ICU. It's not well equipped ICU. We have simple monitor.
Civilian casualties in Afghanistan have become the major operational issue for British and US forces. Soldiers have been ordered to show restraint if there is even the slightest risk of a civilian presence. But tell that to this man. On the night of July 16th, Haj Ni'matullah says he and his family were asleep in their home in Shawalakot district, north of Kandahar city. They were woken by a coalition attack on his village. Ni'matullah's eldest son, Muhammad, is lying in a bed in the ward next door. He agrees to let us film him, but is unable to answer any of our questions. His 4-year-old daughter was killed by the first strike as the family tried to escape their burning homes. Another one of Ni'matullah's sons is lying in a separate ward. He takes us to meet him. Qadratullah is 13 years old. He was irreversibly brain damaged by the bomb that killed his niece. In a country like Afghanistan with no way to get meaningful rehabilitation for your loved ones, brain damage is a life sentence, as much for those afflicted as for their carers. His father is understandably bitter. Over our 7 days at the hospital, we spent every morning by the emergency unit's entrance, watching dozens of injured war victims arriving, many escaping from the heart of the conflict in Helmand. Patients brought by ambulance are rare here. People arrive in whatever they can find and whatever they can afford. Often, they have to help themselves into the hospital. But in addition to the aerial bombs and the mortar blasts, there is another silent threat: fear. Shamsullah has been brought in by his father suffering from dehydration after days of diarrhea. The doctors crowd around the toddler's bed. His father looks on as they try to revive him. But it's too late. He's wrapped in a shroud and taken to the morgue. Shamsullah's parents were too afraid to risk the journey to Mirwais, with the ever-present threat of violence. They waited in the hope their child would recover. It's a story we hear over and over from parents here.
This is the general pediatric ward. And coming in here, you can see how overcrowded it is. There are 2 or 3 children to every bed.
Throughout our time here, the pediatric ward was where we always saw the most harrowing scenes. Every morning, the hospital runs a feeding clinic, and malnourished children are brought in, often by equally malnourished mothers. Despite the billions of dollars pouring into Afghanistan, the country ranks number 2 in the world for infant deaths. The same ranking as in 1990 at the end of the war with the Soviets. After 8 years, there is little evidence of the massive development spend. And as the conflict escalates, the malnutrition rates have climbed with it, pushing up mortality figures. This family traveled 2 days to bring their 8-year-old son here from Helmand. It's a trip that would usually take a few hours, but they had to detour around the Panther's Claw offensive. He's been suffering from meningitis and was immediately admitted.
They are coming late to us. That is why there is no security, so they have to wait till the time they can come. Because many times they are fighting on the road, and they are stealing from the road bombs and this kind of things. So they wait. In the end stage they come to us.
Unable to walk, he's carried to a hospital bed. When we left, it wasn't clear whether he would survive the night. Of course, it's not just the coalition inflicting casualties. This year, for the first time, over 50% of civilian deaths recorded by the UN were caused by Taliban roadside bombs and suicide attacks. The injured man on the stretcher, Bismillah Rahmatullah, was sweeping for old Soviet-era mines when a roadside bomb went off. An Afghan army ambulance was nearby, and the paramedics began treatment. But it wasn't enough. Rahmatullah had lost too much blood. They arrived too late. Muhammad Anwar was also the victim of a Taliban attack. The 11-year-old fruit seller lost his legs to a roadside bomb. But he seemed to take a lot of joy in his new mode of transport, and for his elders, in the face of their loss, he became an unofficial mascot. It's easy to forget that the ones who make it here are the lucky ones. This hospital has been supported by the Red Cross since 1996, so unlike many of the country's other hospitals, the medicines are to international standard and the generator doesn't run out of fuel. This July, the hospital registered a 50% jump in civilian casualties.
We're getting around 700 inpatients a day, 600 are being discharged, so we're having 100 patients extra that stay in the hospital. There are some wards that are around 140, 150, even 175% of the bed occupancy. So we're really having a lot of inpatients.
There are 20 Red Cross trained surgeons here, able to perform 700 operations every month. They're currently running at capacity, with the majority of surgeries performed on those injured in the fighting. And they're still coming. For 1 week, we witnessed what the staff here have dealt with for the years of the NATO presence. It's been 2 weeks since we left this hospital, and although the first stage of the British offensive in Helmand has been declared a success, we've been told that the influx of the wounded and the dying into Mirwais continues relentlessly. Ne'em al-Bagher, Channel 4 News, Kandahar.